With more on Barack Obama's visit and how his tour may play out in the upcoming U.S. presidential election, I'm joined by Solon Simmons with the Institute for Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason University. Now, we know that Obama has said that he wants to shift the focus to Afghanistan. How is this being received overall?
Well, it's hard to tell how this is being received overseas, in particular in the conflict zones, because data are not readily available and we can't always trust them when we find them. But I think in general, Obama is probably going to be fairly well received. If you think about it in the local context, we've been talking about the firsts of a woman or an African-American man being president. But in a global context, this is the first person of African descent who would rule or lead one of the former great powers. And that can't be lost in a former colony like Iraq or Afghanistan. And in Germany also, when he goes there, there's an incredible outpouring of support for him with respect to his competitor, John McCain. So it seems that he's doing fairly well. And although this is a very high-risk setting, it could well play out in his advantage in the long run.
Now, Obama still seems pretty far ahead, certainly as the polls go. And this must be detracting from John McCain right now. What does McCain need to do?
He needs to change something big, because although the polls nationally, let's say they're within 4 or 5%, state by state, he's very far behind. And if you were to run this today, I'd say it's something like a 60 to 65 to 35% chance. He's way behind. He needs to change something. And unfortunately, John McCain looks like he's the loyal opposition, almost as if in a parliamentary system or some kind of an advisor who's not being heard on his cabinet. He needs to change that position. And his main line here is something like, I'm glad he's there for the first time. And yet that, again, is an advisory capacity. So I'm not exactly sure what it is he can do, but he has to play in his strengths, which are the commander-in-chief. He is much an advantage when people say, who's going to be the better commander-in-chief? And somehow he's got to take advantage, I think, probably of some event that comes along that allows him to play that role. Very difficult to do because Obama is so presidential looking, and it seems that seeming makes it so in his case.
Does hanging out with Rudy Giuliani, raising all kinds of rumors, does that count as something big or not so big?
I don't think it's very big. And remember, Giuliani didn't do particularly well in the primary, although he's good on, he's, Mr. 9/11 in a sense. He really he brings us back to that moment and was the great leader through that tragedy in New York. And yet, he's not good with the base. There's an enthusiasm gap that's been reported between Obama and McCain. And Giuliani doesn't speak to those voters on the right who are not enthusiastic. They want to feel like they have a conservative. They don't have a conservative. And so I don't think Giuliani will be the solution there.
All right, so when do they pick running mates? When's the deadline?
Well, it should be, it varies. But they certainly should do it before the convention. You don't want to go into your convention without a running mate. So we don't have much time left. It's varied over time. I would expect in the next, certainly next few weeks we'll see something. So, and again, I've seen both of these figures. People talk about their comfort level. So don't expect a strategic move on either side, but instead we might expect them to pick someone who would really work with their leadership style.
All right, we will definitely be waiting for that. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Okay, thank you, Kate.